I've put in over 500 hours in V Rising, and I've also recently finished getting 100% completion on the whole game. With the 1.0 version being released, there's a lot of new players that are looking to start their vampire journeys for the very first time, so I'm here to let you know all the good and the bad that comes with the game so you can decide for yourself whether it's actually worth spending all that time and money. From fighting cool and challenging bosses to filling up your dungeon and building the vampire castle of your dreams, let's go ahead and see what V Rising has to offer. But first, what exactly is V Rising? V Rising is an isometric action survival RPG where you play as a vampire in a gothic open world. You awaken in the crypt after the vampires were almost annihilated, and the point of the game is to regain your powers and take back the world of the living, one boss fight at a time. The interesting thing about this game is that you can tackle this either solo, in PvE, or PvP, which all feels completely different. And not only that, but there's multiple difficulty options, with brutal mode being the hardest one, but we'll get into that in a bit. There's three main things that make up the core gameplay loop of V Rising. That's combat, crafting, and exploration. We'll start with combat first, as it is my favorite aspect of the game, and it's what I believe is V Rising's biggest strength. Upon awakening in your crypt, and after the game teaches you how to craft a bone sword, you're gonna have your first taste of V Rising combat. In the beginning, you get a weapon skill, 2 spells, a dash, and some auto attacks. It starts off super simple, but as you continue to defeat bosses or V-Bloods, you'll start unlocking new spells and recipes that expand the game's combat system. First, the weapons. There's 8 different types of weapons in this game, and each of them have their own unique sets of playstyles and weapon skills. They also feel completely different from each other. For example, the slow cleaving attacks of the Great Sword feels heavy and hits very hard while doing decent AoE, while the longbow is more of a patient man's weapon. You try to keep space as you charge up your skills with basic attacks, and then unleash a more powerful version of your abilities based on how many stacks you were able to apply. And that goes the same for the rest of the weapon types. I recommend trying everything and seeing which one suits your playstyle the best. Now, to enhance the experience even further, even though you're limited to only 2 skills per weapon, you can fill your hotbar with as much weapons as you want to carry. So what this means is that you can combo each of these different weapon skills alongside each other by quick swapping, which does take a decent amount of time to get used to, but once you do start to master it, it gives the players a huge amount of freedom and attack variety when fighting both bosses or players. The second aspect of combat is the spell system. Currently, there's 6 spell schools available in the game, with blood and chaos spells being my favorite, and then you also get ultimate abilities, which are game-changing if you utilize them correctly. The way you acquire these spells are also tied to the V-Blood carriers, who will reward you with spell points, and then you're free to choose the order of which spells you want to unlock first. Now combine all of these together, and that's V Rising's combat system. It's very versatile with a lot of variety, allowing players to come up with their own unique playstyle, which are only enhanced once you start fighting bosses. Speaking of bosses, there's a whole 57 of them in this game as of the making of this video, and these are not just meat sacks or glorified common enemies with more health and more damage. No, these bosses are uniquely designed, sometimes with multiple phases, and can be incredibly difficult. They definitely took inspiration from Souls, and while this is not a Souls-like, the pattern of learning and working on mastering their attacks definitely gives me a similar feeling. Next is crafting. Now, crafting encompasses both the usual survival game crafting as well as the base building in V Rising. Again, it starts off simple. You pick any available bordered base location and drop a castle heart there to claim land. Once the castle heart is dropped, you'll be able to make a bunch of different furniture, which will allow you to refine materials that you get throughout the world, and then you can put those refined materials into crafting to make your equipment. Equipment or gear is directly tied to your gear level, so upgrading your weapons and armor are how you get stronger in this game. The only thing is that the recipes for these furnitures and materials are all direct rewards from bosses, so you would have to slowly make your way up the boss tree to move from Act 1 to Act 2 and so on and so forth. Eventually, you'll start getting these jewels too, which enhance your spells by adding more effects, and then they have their own different tiers as well. So the gameplay loop would be you crafting your weapons and armor, beating bosses to unlock stronger recipes, gathering materials, refining them, getting stronger, and then fighting harder bosses until you reach the very end. Now, if that gets monotonous, here's another one of my favorite parts of the game: base building. More specifically, base designing. This might not be for most people, but you can tackle it in two different ways. Either you make the most aesthetic, coolest looking base possible, or you go for something that maximizes efficiency. You can even go halfway with both, but the important thing is that you're going to be spending quite a bit of time building up your bases as you unlock more furniture and workshops and all that stuff, and it allows you to take a break from all the fighting and the frustration that will 100% come with getting destroyed by bosses. I personally make an effort to go hard on these base designs and would love to see what you guys come up with in your own playthroughs. Now let's move on to the third pillar of V-Rising, the exploration. First thing you'll notice as this is a vampire game is that sunlight hurts. So when you're traveling throughout the day, you'd have to basically micromanage your route to make sure that you're sticking to the shadows. I really like this feature because it makes traveling interesting, while at the same time adding a sense of urgency when you're fighting at night, because you don't want to be that vampire who's about to kill a boss just when the sun starts going up and turns you to ashes. It makes you plan ahead and make the most use of your time while the moon is still up in the night sky. The map of V-Rising is also quite large. There's 7 zones out so far, each with their own unique look and sometimes interesting mechanics. Farbane, Dunley, and Silverlight are the human lands, so they're pretty chill aside from enemies who definitely hate vampires, as well as the church who work to annihilate us every chance they get. But then there's also Northern and Southern Gloomrot, with one being in a constant thundering rainstorm and the other being a polluted radioactive zone with mutated enemies. So those are just a few examples, and the great thing is that you can base in any of these areas if they catch your fancy. If you'd like to know the best base locations in the game, you can check out a video I made in the top right corner. So, those are the 3 main things that you're going to be focusing on throughout your time in Vardaran. But now, I want to talk about the additions to the 1.0 version of the game because I think Stunlock did a great job with preventing the game from being stale even after 3 or 4 playthroughs. Now before we move forward, I'd like to first thank the sponsor of this video, Gamivo.com. Gamivo is an online platform for gamers where you can get your favorite games, including recently released ones like Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree or V-Rising at the best prices. They've got a huge selection of games for all the major platforms, and not only that, but they've kindly prepared a 5% discount code for the viewers of the channel. That's right, if you head to the link down below in the pinned comment or the description of this video, it'll direct you straight to their website. Pick any game you want, and on the checkout page, make sure to type in code KAGANATH to take advantage of the 5% off. In addition, if you want to have exclusive daily or monthly discounts and VIP access to a 24/7 live chat with their support team, go ahead and sign up for Gamivo Smart. It comes with everything I mentioned, plus pre-order priority and a free customer protection program. All of that for only $1.08 a month. They're also verified in Trustpilot, having amazing reviews, so you'll know that your purchases are protected. So again, if you want to get your favorite games at discounted prices and support this channel at the same time, head on over there with the link down below and make sure not to miss out on the 5% discount with code KAGANATH. Let's get back to the video. The new area, Ruins of Mortium, added an almost perpetual endgame goal to V-Rising that I personally think extends the playtime of the game. Basically, aside from new bosses, enemies, and all that stuff, they added what are called Rift Incursions. You can start experiencing this in the mid-game, but late game is definitely the focus of this whole new area, and how it works is that at specific times of the day, a rift will open up in the new area where you'll have to fight waves of enemies and at the end fight a shadow form of one of the bosses. Beating these incursions rewards you with Stygian Shards, which can be used for unlocking legendary weapons, passives, and all that good stuff. But what this means for the game is a constant place where players throughout the server will regularly encounter each other, trying to get as much Stygian Shards as they could. In PvE, it's just a good time. You meet the people on your server, you hang out, and it's just generally a pretty cool experience. In PvP, however, it looks a bit different. People back in the early access version of the game used to complain that there's not much to do after defeating all the bosses, because back then, endgame for PvP players revolved around castle sieges and stealing soul shards from each other. Now, that's still there, but in the 1.0 version, in order to unlock the strongest weapons in the game, you would need to do these endgame rift incursions, which turns the whole area into a bloodbath. I'm not a very good PvP player, I'm more so into just chilling and designing the base, but for PvP players with this game's combat system, you're in for an experience. The last thing I want to discuss is the addition of difficulty options, which, if you messed around with the server settings back in the early access days, you'd know that you can adjust pretty much every aspect of difficulty in this game, even the amount of materials that drop from farming. The most important thing that they added in terms of difficulty is Brutal Mode, which I actually did a recent playthrough on right here if you want to watch it later. But basically, Brutal Mode not only makes everything harder by doing things like increase 25% health, 70% damage, and 3 more levels, but they actually added Brutal Mode exclusive boss mechanics that are really cool, really annoying, and basically makes another complete playthrough worth it if you've beaten this game multiple times before. Before we end the video, here are some things I feel they can improve on if V-Rising is to be a major contender in the survival genre. The main problem that V-Rising have always had is longevity. After you beat all the bosses, designed your castle, got all the best gear, I'm always hit with the feeling of now what? When I played in a PvP server, there was the goal of gearing all your servants, doing sieges, and dominating the server, but even that gets stale, and PvP players are the minority in this game. This is the reason why a couple of months after an update is released, you'd start seeing posts asking, is V-Rising dead? Because players, even though they want to keep playing, just move on to other games where there's always something to do. Ruins of Mortium definitely alleviate the problem a little bit, but I don't think it's the complete answer. I don't have the answer for this myself, but I've seen players recommend things like endgame raids or dungeons, maybe seasonal events, and even a ranked MMR, which I'm not sure how I feel about that. I personally want to see more dynamic events, and I forget where I read this, but somebody suggested events like a vampire hunting event where the church would actively raid your castle and you'd have to defend it. Or the werewolves are causing chaos because of a full moon and the server needs to work together to defeat them in a vampire versus werewolves event. Literally anything that would make me want to come back every once in a while, make sure my castle doesn't decay in case the devs drop something that's cool and exclusive. Again, these are just me throwing ideas at the wall, but until the devs solve this problem of longevity, I think V-Rising is always going to have that problem of losing players until another major update comes. So that's V-Rising. It's a very good game with a somewhat limited lifespan at the moment, but for what it brings to the table, I'd say it's 100% worth playing, but not for more than a month or two. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more, and also thank you to our patrons for supporting the channel. I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.